Today is my guest on Rumble. I have with me Briahna Joy Gray. She's been with us before. And by the way, Briahna, I believe you are the first repeat guest on Rumble. So I know there's a prize for this. I'm not quite sure what it is. It will be messengered to you as soon as possible. But thank you for coming back on. We so enjoyed the discussion that we had with you a couple of months ago. Briahna, for those of you who don't know, was the national press secretary for Bernie Sanders' 2020 presidential campaign. And she was the host of Hear the Burn, as in I applied for the job to host Fear the Burn, but I think they thought that was a little too aggressive. Briahna is a writer. Actually, she was a lawyer, if I'm correct.
That is correct.
And then decided to hell with that. And trust me, I know there are attorneys listening to this right now saying, how can I be like that? I want out. I want out. No more of this.
That's exactly what I used to think. I listened with bated breath to any tale of a former attorney I ever wanted to tell. So I'm happy to provide that kind of inspiration and play it forward.
So, but actually now, no longer a lawyer. Briahna is a writer and contributing editor at Current Affairs, one of the best magazines in the country. And she has just published her new piece in Current Affairs. It's called In Defense of Litmus Tests. And I encourage you with this incredible piece that Briahna just wrote. And that's why I wanted to have you come on the episode today because, well, let's just lay it out there. I'm depressed.
Yeah.
No, I'm serious. I really, and I don't get depressed. And it was really just a couple of nights ago just before the first night of the convention started, I was on Ari Melber and MSNBC and people were writing in afterwards going, Michael Moore looked so happy all of a sudden. Michael Moore looked optimistic. There was a twinkle in his eye. And I think but that night, I have to say, in addition to all the awful stuff like having Republicans there speaking, when Bernie came on, instead of being inspired or happy to see him or whatever, I sunk. I just instantly sunk into a funk. And as he was standing there in front of like 4 or 5 cords of firewood. It's like
wholesome.
Very wholesome. Anyways, it's a Vermont thing, I guess. I don't know. But as he finished, this thought came into my head and I couldn't get it out of my head. And the thought was, I've just seen Bernie Sanders on primetime network television for the last time. This will not happen again. It's not that he's going away. It's not that he's not going to finish out a Senate term. It's not that he's not going to be on MSNBC or CNN or whatever. But what I just saw, him being able to be on primetime network television, that's never going to happen again. They do not want his voice. They don't want our voice. And, to them, we are essentially the enemy because we stand for things that are very much opposed to what they believe in. And I felt there he goes. It's like, George Washington's farewell address. It's like, the last of it. And does that mean the last of us? Does that mean the last of the revolution? Does that mean the last of, and of course it doesn't.
Yeah.
But I'd be dishonest, Briahna, if I didn't say that this week and then the second night of the convention was even worse.
Yes, I agree with that. Look, I heard a lot of lefties say that when they saw Senator Sanders speak, they were reminded of what we could have had and that it was dispiriting for that reason. And, that feeling was compounded by the fact that the 2 speeches of that first night that were heralded the most were Senator Sanders and Michelle Obama's, even from corners of the media that normally have no positive word to say about Senator Sanders or members of the left. And there was this kind of cynical feeling that, okay, well, now that Bernie doesn't present a threat, now that he's obviously not going to be president, now that he's so old that is extremely unlikely that he would ever run again, they can be honest about what a compelling speaker he is and how much he has to offer. And that just underscores how dishonest they had been throughout the primary process and the primary process in 2016. And that's dispiriting for other reasons, right?
Can I say something though before anybody tunes out because they're saying, "Oh, I'm not going to listen to Mike and Briahna, bellyache about how Bernie's not the candidate." That's not what this episode is about. It's about things like that day earlier in the day. Dave Sirota wrote a column and quoted these sources from the healthcare industry who quietly have, even though it's in the platform, the so-called public option to make Obamacare a little bit better, that they have no intention. They have no intention of doing that here in Biden's first term. And the healthcare lobbyists were like ecstatic that they weren't going to have to do the public option, let alone Medicare for all. And then there was the next day, it coming out that quietly they had, even though it was in the platform committee voted on getting off fossil fuels and not, divesting from fossil fuels. And it got removed from the final version of the platform.
Yeah.
Just like dropped without anybody saying anything.
I believe the reporting was that it was mistakenly included to begin with. The subtext being that it was, part of the Bernie people, the Team Bernie's Unity Commission editions that people hadn't noticed in time to extract. They missed the edit and accidentally left some of the good stuff in. Yeah, it's frustrating.
And then the oil and coal industry, they're all so thrilled that the Democrats and then Elizabeth Warren the other night, I think at the end of the second night, was on with Colbert. And Colbert said to him, "Let me just ask you, because you've been the one, you fought Wall Street for us. So how do you feel about the fact that," here he quoted the Times, "how thrilled Wall Street is that Joe Biden is the candidate, how excited they are about the Biden presidency. What's your answer to that?" And then she pivoted to answering something else, and he came back to it. He goes, "No, I got to ask you again. Are you as excited as Wall Street is about the Biden?" And she pivoted. He asked it a third time, and then he finally had to say, "I see. I'm not going to get an answer."
Wow, I missed that interview. I'm going to have to go back and watch that one. Yeah, look, it's difficult because I don't ever want to sound conspiratorial. There's a way that the left, because of the kinds of criticisms we make, we're characterized as never being happy with anything, disliking everyone. And because there are so many people on both sides of the aisle that we have critiques of, that is often flipped into, well, the only person you like is Bernie, and it's a cult of personality. But I think what's more accurate to say is that the number of people who are genuinely unbought and politically independent and genuinely fighting to advance the interests that the majorities of Americans share is just so small. They're just so few that our positive statements are reserved for a fairly narrow tranche of politicians. And then when one fails, when we don't win, it feels like a real blow to a movement as opposed to just an individual loss. But that's not to say that we haven't won a great deal, right? There was a time not so long ago, even 4 years ago, where if I were to say healthcare is a human right, I think an overwhelming majority of Americans would kind of roll or Democrats even would roll their eyes and say, right. Yeah, sure, whatever, hippie, or right. If I seriously said we need to commit trillions of dollars to meet, Green New Deal energy goals in order to keep the climate from killing us, people would say, yeah, sure, I guess that's something we should do, but there's no way it's going to happen. And, Bernie's plan was something like $17 trillion and Biden's, I think, $1.7 trillion. So it's obviously an enormous difference in magnitude. But it is true that even the ideas of Biden committing that much would have been kind of unthinkable a short time ago. In 2016, we had knockdown, drag-out fights over whether or not we should have a $15 minimum wage. And now that is something that's considered part of the Democratic Party platform. So it's a delicate balance between not wanting to, have people rest on their laurels and not wanting people to be so depressed that they feel like the fight isn't worth it in the first place. And I think we should be very cognizant of the fact that the gains that we have made give us an enormous amount of rhetorical and moral and political leverage that we didn't have before. And it's incumbent on us to use that leverage and use the people that we have left in the fight, including Bernie, including Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and newbies like Jamal Bowman and Mondaire Jones and Cori Bush to push on.
Okay, so how do we push on here? Because I read your piece in Current Affairs. I thought it was brilliant, and I expected more of just the same. I don't know what to call it, but it's the thing you would expect that you would write. Maybe I would write. You would be more to the point maybe than I would be. I'm still in kind of a Midwestern frame of mind that I believe. But this is such an excellent dissection of what happened and where we're at, and what does it mean to be for Joe Biden? Or what I'm trying to, there's I think a quote somewhere in the Bible that says something. What does it profit someone if they gain the whole world but suffer the loss of their own soul? What does it profit us, if we gain Joe Biden but suffer the loss of our soul? And in the long game, in the long run, aren't we actually doing some serious damage to ourselves? Now, having said that, before people again flip out as they're listening to this, if you're riding a bicycle or something, please don't run off the road or anything. But if I can speak for you, but you should say it in your own words because I liked it better the way you wrote it. But the way I'll just say it for myself is yes, of course, Trump has to go. Stop it, everybody. Stop it. Yes, Trump, go, gone, toast, crush him. Right. And yes, Briahna and I are not stupid. We know that there's now only one narrow path that's been offered to us to crush him. Okay. We've got that too. But I just worry that if it means that if we give up the essence of this fight, that we'll never succeed. And I mean, in what, we can cite so many examples in history where it wasn't pulling back that won the struggle. It was taking the risk of even crossing a line that you told yourself that you couldn't or shouldn't cross, but you had to cross it, or we were going to go down into defeat. Maybe explain a little bit of what you maybe wrote in this article, and especially as how it relates to what feels like a conundrum, or might sound like a conundrum to certain mainstream Democrats thinking that we're caught in something here. Maybe there's some glee that they get from that the only way to get rid of Trump is to vote for Biden. But what if we were to look at this in not just in context, but in a more rich, full way of the longer struggle that we're in the middle of and that we hope to succeed in our lifetime?
Yeah, so my article is really a critique of the argument that Democrats should vote blue no matter who. And that isn't to say that I'm arguing that Democrats...
Just repeat that again for people that aren't familiar. There's that. We had to listen to this on the campaign trail there with Bernie, that they wanted a loyalty pledge from everyone, that you must vote blue no matter who. And, and there were things where you were not allowed to speak at something if you did not essentially sign on to that mantra.
Right. And, this loyalty pledge was extracted from the very beginning from everyone, but the question seemed to be disproportionately asked of Bernie in debate contexts, in interview contexts, and he got follow-up questions about it as though it was a gotcha question when his answer was always clear from the beginning that, of course, he was going to support the Democratic nominee, right? But what was interesting is that people who weren't asking the question, who weren't actually in an authority position to extract a loyalty pledge, right? Just regular reporters would ask this question. And there seemed to be a value judgment that if you were to raise any question about whether or not any of the candidates failed to reflect the values of the party, You were the one that was being disloyal to the party as opposed to the candidate who didn't reflect Democratic Party values. And namely, I'm thinking and talking about Michael Bloomberg. So we all remember that really stunning moment where Elizabeth Warren kind of took him out of the race in, I think it was a January debate, where she says, we have to stand up against a man who has talked about women in such terrible, vile, sexist terms, who has all of these accusations of, gender bias and misconduct in a professional context, who supports stop and frisk and racist policies. And no, I'm not talking about Donald Trump. I'm talking about Mayor Bloomberg. And it was a stunning rebuke. And Bloomberg never recovered from that, right? But the very fact,
a beautiful moment, yeah.
Right, the very fact that she could lay it out that way and describe Bloomberg in terms that the average listener would presume were being applied to Donald Trump suggests that the differences between those candidates weren't as stark as we would like to believe. And if there are even superficial ways in which the man could be compared to Donald Trump, it begs the question whether or not anybody should vote blue, no matter who, if Bloomberg were the eventual nominee, right?
Right, exactly.
So I use that example in the article to ask people whether or not they have any personal litmus tests. We often talk about Republicans negatively and criticize them by saying, well, they have no bottom. They vote for Trump. They vote for Trump if he shot someone in the middle of Fifth Avenue, right? We use that specific example again and again and again to show that no matter what, Republicans are going to vote for Republicans. Republicans will vote for Donald Trump. But the ethical position of saying we're going to vote for Democrats no matter what never comes up. So I say that not to say we shouldn't vote for the Democrat in this instance, but to try to get at the bigger question of what happens over the long term when we have two sets of people locked into this pattern of just voting based on party affiliation, as opposed to questioning what bars are they going to set internally as members of a party, and make any effort to drag their party one way or the other, and preferably, obviously, in the direction that the people are headed in. And that, for both parties, is to the left. So what I basically argue is this. The usual bind that we find ourselves in, or that we're told we're in, is that we have to make a choice between electability and doing the right thing, doing the more progressive thing. We're told that most Americans aren't progressive, that we're a center-right country, and therefore we have to make all kinds of compromises as Democrats every 4 years at the ballot box. Every 4 years, we're told that we're confronting the worst, most dangerous president in American history. And frankly, I don't even feel like disagreeing with that. The fact is, it's true. It's usually true. Yeah. But then we have to start asking ourselves, why is it that every 4 years we're presented with the worst president in American history? Why do they keep getting incrementally worse? And is that fact connected to the fact that we keep following the Republican Party to the right by nominating increasingly center-right candidates in an effort to attract what we think is going to appeal to swing voters? And the end result being that there's a growing and growing gap between what the kind of policies that average Americans want. A majority of Americans support a wealth tax on the extremely wealthy, and on and on and on down the list. Yet we don't get these things, not because there's too much division in this country, not because Americans are too right-wing. The perception of division and difference to convince us that we need to sublimate our morals and values and the very principles that are supposed to define what it means to be as a Democrat. Work we talked about at the top of the episode, right? Bernie has been advocating all of these progressive, get majorities of Americans understanding that they deserve better. That they can say to Joe Biden, if we so desire, we can say, hey, there is no trade-off between you doing the right thing that the people want and being an electable candidate. You were nominated because you were perceived to be electable. Great. You will only become more electable and better able to beat Trump if you stand for something other than just beating Trump, and also stand to advance all of these overwhelmingly popular populist policies that will enormously benefit Americans, especially in the midst of an unprecedented health crisis and global economic crisis.
In the NBC poll this week, 58% of Americans gave as the number one reason why they're voting for Biden is because he's not Trump.
Right.
58%. That was the main thing they could think of in terms of why they support Joe Biden, because they want to beat Trump because he's not Trump. And wow, that is how low we've set the bar. It'd be like if we started this podcast and you said to me, I thank you for coming on, and you said, well, I really didn't have anything else to do tonight. Oh, thank you.
I was going to wash my hair, but
wash my hair, talk to Michael Moore, wash my hair, talk to Michael Moore, talk to Michael Moore. But it really, I fear in terms of us not being able to get rid of Trump, pause for effect, that because we don't have a candidate that people are positively excited about because of what he is going to fight for and do for us, that they're going in with this sort of negative thing and hate of Trump. I get that. But, I was always taught that love conquered hate, and that love, and the people who love Trump, they really love Trump. They love Trump. Yeah. And that 63 million that he got in 16, they're all coming back. They're all coming back.
I saw a poll of Republican voters that showed something very similar, that I believe 48% of Republican voters are going to vote for Trump because he's Republican. So both sides are doing it. Look, at the end of the day, I want Democrats who are listening to put themselves in the shoes of Republicans. I know that's hard and it's difficult to hear, but we have had our candidates and at times that haven't always behaved the way we would have wanted an ideal Democratic candidate to behave, right?
Hillary.
Or even if you go back to, I personally don't believe that, personal indiscretion is, similar to the kind of betrayals of public trust. But in an ideal world, I wouldn't want to have to be in a world where I justify why my candidate has an affair with, a 22-year-old intern. I don't want to have to justify any of those things. But when those things happen, we all buckled down and said, okay, but what's more important? Supreme Court appointments, abortion rights, voting rights, all of these kinds of things, right? And we don't agree with what Republicans value, but they're sitting on the other side saying, well, even if I disagree with who Trump is as a human being, I still value abortion rights or, small government or whatever it is that is driving their value system.
Right.
So in order to disentangle this, we have to start looking at the fact that there is a great deal of overlap here. And it really begs the question, if there are all these policies that are now enormously popular across the ideological spectrum, why aren't these major presidential candidates capitalizing on that and winning? If they care so much about beating Trump, why wouldn't you work to put together a coalition that is galvanized by the fact that you're able to support them at this moment of greatest national need? And to answer that question, you have to start to look at who it is that is funding these candidates. And when you have Joe Biden, whose senior advisor, Steve Ricchetti, is a former healthcare lobbyist, and you look at the fact that he has taken more money from billionaires than any other person in the primary contest, and you look at who's filling the fundraiser coffers, it's no wonder why it is that he's making the political decisions that he is and saying he's going to veto Medicare for all if it were to pass the House and Senate, even in the middle of a pandemic where almost 200,000 Americans have now died.
Right. Or quietly remove the anti-fossil fuel plank from the platform.
Right.
Or I thought I heard him say back when Bernie dropped out in the spring that he was going to get behind free college for all, at least free tuition at public colleges for all. Where's that?
Yeah, I think that they're doing, if I recall correctly, unless they've backtracked on it, it was he had capitulated on free public college. It was limited
to community college.
It was limited in some ways, and there was no student debt cancellation beyond, I think, 10,000 from people who went to public colleges.
Yeah.
But don't quote me on that.
No, I know we shouldn't say. I'll look it up and get the right language. But it's lame and it's weak. And your point is, Why be weak when the American public overwhelmingly supports free or low cost childcare, universal health care, all these things. What they can't even come out for marijuana. They can't. The left party can't come out. The liberal party can't come out for marijuana. There's like that. The whole public has changed their attitude about this in a very quick period of time.
Yep.
Why not say that?
Well, who stands to lose the most from the legalization of marijuana is the
Marlboro man. Yeah.
Right. It's like, it's no accident. Look, at one point I quote in this piece, Joe Biden himself kind of acknowledging the influence of money in politics. He said at a 2007 campaign event, to a reporter, he said, if you, Lynn, bundle $250,000 for me, all legal, and then you call me after I'm excited and say, Joe, I'd like to talk to you about something. You didn't buy me, but it's human nature. You helped me. I'm going to say, sure, Lynn, come on in. The front of the line is always filled with people whose pockets are filled. It's human nature.
Wow.
And that's not to say that's not an outlier statement, right? Joe Biden is not uniquely evil in that respect. Just like when we were saying the same thing about Hillary Clinton in 2016, she wasn't uniquely craven for the Wall Street speeches. But the reality is, just because that's the way the game is played doesn't mean that it's the way the game should be played. And we should be really clear-eyed about the consequences of doing politics that way.
So your point, though, is that, okay, so yes, we've already made it clear Trump's got to go. Biden is the only path that's available to us now to remove him. But your point is that you can walk and chew gum here. In fact, you have to at the same time. That yes, you've got to vote on November 3rd or before, preferably. And yes, Biden is our path, has been allowed to us. But we also, as Bernie said for a long time, and now the uprising that has taken place. Thank you, George Floyd, for your sacrifice. I was thinking about this the other night. Maybe this is a crazy thing to say, but I said to Bales, I said, we should end every podcast honoring or thanking George Floyd and Briahna Taylor, and everybody else who's given their lives. They've given their lives in the same way that my uncle gave his life in World War II, fighting fascism. That they gave their lives, and we're going to be, I think, the better off for it. And so I had this thought of, would I be willing to? What if that were the case? If you could show me into a crystal ball and show me that I might have to give my life, but the end result of that would be such an uprising that millions and millions of people would take to the streets, not only to the streets, but to the voting booth, to the local organizing committees, to Black Lives Matter, to whatever group. And out of this would come these very things that you and I are talking about on this episode. Who amongst us would be willing to say, well, I want to live. I really don't want to die.
Yeah. I wish it didn't have to take those kinds of sacrifices. And unfortunately, George Floyd didn't sign up for that.
And he didn't get to decide. He didn't have the choice.
Right.
That's right. But yet I want to say his name every day. I never want to forget. And I never want to forget Briahna or any of the others, Eric Garner, Trayvon, any of them who had to give their lives without their own choice in the matter. But that what came out of that was something where the American people decided enough is enough. And the promise of the American dream is going to finally be realized because we're sick of it. It's only either been a dream or a nightmare. It's never been a reality.
Yeah. And that's a little bit why it's so frustrating to see the Democratic Party platform and Joe Biden in particular be so kind of indifferent to the movement that's happening in the streets at the same time that he and the party celebrates the commitment of Black voters to electing Democrats. There seems to be a real kind of gross dissonance there when George Floyd's family is included in the DNC in the first night of the convention, and yet Joe Biden persists in not wanting to, do very basic things that he could do by executive order, like legalizing marijuana. I mean, I'm struck by the fact that, marijuana being illegal is a but-for cause of Breonna Taylor's death, right? It was a no-knock warrant for marijuana sales. And you can...
Was it really? Was it marijuana?
It was marijuana sales.
Oh, man.
And so there's all of this, let's paint Black Lives Matter on the street, and, Bank of America proudly sponsors Black Lives Matter and all of this kind of thing.
Yeah.
But the party itself is unwilling to do really the bare minimum, even though it would only inure to his electoral benefit, right? Again, this isn't he should do the right thing, even if it's going to cost him some votes. This is a moment where he could do the right thing, and it would actually make him more likely to beat Trump. When we talk about people like Joe Rogan, who I know is very controversial, his endorsement or pseudo endorsement of Bernie Sanders was very controversial. When you look at the reasons why he said he supported Bernie, it wasn't that, I think that Bernie is going to be, bigoted or right wing in all of these ways. Of course not. He was someone who identifies as more conservative than most Democrats, who doesn't identify as a Democrat or Republican, but was drawn to Bernie because he believes in marijuana legalization, because he believes in Medicare for all, because he is a non-interventionist who wants to end endless wars. He found aspects of Bernie's platform that were consistent with his own ideology. And I think that is how you get swing voters. Swing voters are people who I think are often looking for, political independence, a willingness to fight for the people, a willingness to buck the establishment. And instead, the Democratic Party trots out John Kasich's, people who are just kind of like milquetoast versions of one party or the other, in an effort to, seduce people into this idea that, there's a kinder, gentler version of the Republican Party, and it's called the Democrats. I mean, at the same time, you're trying to push that message. You have Bernie Sanders and AOC saying something very different, that we're a party that should stand up for different kinds of belief structure. And it ends up in a very muddled and confused message. And you don't have to do that. There's a way that you can stand by values that are core to the party and also attract people who have been Republican for other reasons by simply genuinely offering to fight for them and what they believe in. I don't know. I don't know what to say about that as a party, and I am not in a position where I would ever want to tell people what to do with their vote. But why I wrote this article is because I can't help but observe that the frenetic panic over vote blue no matter who, and the way that people, celebrities like Bradley Whitford and Deborah Messing are losing their minds anytime anyone suggests that they're less than happy with Joe Biden, right? There was a reporter I said in my piece who said that Joe Biden is running a flawed campaign. And the fact that she just called it a flawed campaign, which who amongst us isn't flawed, right? Set off sirens and she turned it on Twitter, and there's a whole media cycle about how she was going to reelect Trump basically for offering the mildest criticism of Joe Biden. And where does that leave us? So I think all of that panic is around the realization that voters have more power in this moment than we've ever had.
I think just the opposite. I think actually by being honest and saying things what people are already feeling, like there are these flaws in the campaign, but by acknowledging that, and then of course, and saying, well, we got to get rid of Trump, and we got to get, we got to go in there and vote for Biden. All that, you would think that's actually the smart way to increase the vote, by being empathetic with where so many millions of people are very nervous about Joe Biden, and rightly so. So that means that if you're nervous, then now's the time, you're saying, okay, I want to get on board because I want to help. I don't want these flaws to hurt the country.
Yes.
That seems like a very patriotic position to take.
I think that's right. And I think that Hillary Clinton's failure to kind of recognize that fact and reckon with the critiques and rehabilitate herself in the course of the primary season really hurt her in the general. Yeah. She seems, she came off as kind of unwilling to listen to criticism, stonewalling, gaslighting, and it turned off voters who otherwise would have kind of done their duty and voted for her to keep Trump out of office, I think. And now we're seeing these same mistakes repeated.
Yeah, I heard the tone was, I wanted to say to her, hey, you won. You should, why, you put let's do a victory lap here. Before you start your downer talk, take a little victory lap. You did beat Trump. That's a statistical fact. But instead it was this sort of, and MSNBC now, whenever they have me on, Basil, I don't read any of this stuff on the comment stuff, but Basil tells me that Twitter goes crazy amongst Democrats or so-called, moderate centrist Democrats. Why are you having him on? Why are you wrecking the opening night of the convention for us? Why do you have your Michael Moore on? And it's like, wow, really? Because, we're all kind of on the same side here. I mean, I know you don't believe in the same things I believe in, because I take it to the logical place it should be. Like, Obamacare. Yeah. Okay, good. Except 30 million people still don't have health coverage.
Right.
So if you're willing to settle and say, you know what, it's good enough. It's good enough. Most people got it. 30 million. Yeah. Okay. Pull themselves up by their bootstraps. I'm sorry. I'm not with you on that. So
yeah, it seems.
But what is that? I mean, I don't know. What is? I mean, sure, you get it too.
MSNBC doesn't allow me on, so we need you. We need you in the fight there, Michael Moore. Well, I don't know. I certainly they weren't.
What does it say if they let me on and not you? That doesn't make me feel. That doesn't make me. So the bar is low enough for me to come on.
I won't speak for all of the hosts. I do know that there were sometimes booking pushback during the context of the campaign, and afterward, there was one host in particular that I found out from a booker that wasn't affiliated with me or the campaign that suggested that I be booked on their show. And when they made the suggestion, the host said back to them, "Actually, I won't be using your booker services anymore. Don't contact me. I will never have her on."
Wow.
And blacklisted the booker just for suggesting my name.
Oh my God. I know a lot of the people there. They're pretty good, especially some of the producers. And how about the next time they ask me on, I say, put me on, but you got to bring Briahna Joy Gray.
I don't want you to get blacklisted, Michael. We need you on there.
Well, I know, but I'm past the point of being blacklisted. I think I went to some kind of mountain and now I'm in some weird cloud that protects me from that. But I hate to hear that. But I often wonder, like, why don't the people I read, whether it's people in Current Affairs, whether it's people in that other Brooklyn magazine, or whether it's The Intercept, or why don't we see more of them on any of the cable news? I don't understand. I mean, I think I do understand, but I don't understand, because it would seem like the debate would be more exciting to have not just the same old people agreeing with each other show after show after show, but to have on some, critical back and forth, respectful, but nonetheless, let's air this all out. I hope we have that, assuming Biden is the president.
Yeah.
Because these voices have to be heard.
They seem to have some, I don't want to call them tokens because they're people that I like and respect, but they have to kind of tokenize the left on most of these shows, where they will have one tops per panel alongside Democrats who were formerly comms directors for Hillary Clinton or George W. Bush, often, or Barack Obama, untitled. Their affiliation often goes unremarked upon, presented as neutral observers. And then we'll have, Abdul al-Sayed, who's often described as Bernie supporter, as though he wasn't a candidate and a doctor and a professional in his own right, or a handful of other people. But you're right. I think a fair study showed that MSNBC has their panels are skewed more toward Republicans than panels on Fox News.
Wow, is that right?
Yeah, we talked about this in the media bias episode we did on Hear the Burn. So it's troubling, and I think that's why you see a lot of success and excitement around shows like Rising with Crystal Ball and Sagar and Jetty, because at least you have two people who are debating with each other over the issues, and you get to see the contours of an argument that folks who watch the mainstream news just aren't even aware of. I mean, I watched coverage. I was watching, the convention on CNN and just watching the coverage after. It's snooze-inducing just because there's a uniformity of opinion. And
Right.
how long can you sit and listen to someone say, oh, Democrats are great, they've never done anything wrong, they're perfect in every respect, Donald Trump is bad, he's bad, he's bad, he's bad, and the only thing that's wrong with the world is that Donald Trump is bad. In fact, there was a woman on yesterday, I believe, who was in an exchange, Yvette Simpson. She was in an exchange with Rahm Emanuel. And she made the case that, like, yeah, the convention was kind of boring because at a certain point you have to talk about policy and what the Democrats are offering affirmatively instead of just Trump is bad. And Rahm Emanuel cuts her off and is like, no, the point is that Trump is bad. People are going to vote for Biden because Trump is bad. We don't need to hear anything else. And it got a little contentious and it was interesting. And of course, Yvette is entirely right. But generally speaking, she that her perspective isn't there. And it's just Rahm Emanuel talking to David Axelrod about how bad Trump is. And there's nobody to offer any other color.
You see, what's dangerous about this, about not allowing all voices to be heard, is that quietly in the last few weeks, Trump has been gaining on Biden.
Yes.
CNN released a poll yesterday, CNN, and that poll said that they did a poll just of registered voters in the swing states. So that's really the only poll that ever really matters. Registered voters in the swing states. All right.
Yeah.
This is what it showed. 49% for Biden, 48% for Trump. That's this week.
Yeah.
That's this week. Everybody who just heard me say that, 49 Biden, 48 Trump, in the swing state poll, if a lump just entered your throat, good luck with the lump for the next few seconds, because it should be a large lump, because everybody needs to understand what is going, how could that happen? How could that happen?
Yeah.
It happens because as we moderate ourselves, as we pull back, as we pull our punches, as we exclude our voices, people become less excited about getting out to vote.
That's
for
right.
Biden. And the other side, they've never lost their excitement. They've
Right.
never lost their love. And they've just been, biding their time and waiting for this moment. And I got to tell you, because now I'm old enough to quote the Dukakis Bush election, Bush won, and the Kerry election, all these elections, the week of the Democratic convention, Kerry was ahead. Dukakis was ahead. And it didn't hold. It didn't hold because people don't like milk toast. They don't like, that would be, imagine, just take that word. You toast your bread, nice and crispy, and then put it in a cat's bowl of milk.
You're not a cat's bowl.
Okay. Something that looked, not the actual cat's bowl. No, not that. I meant though the size of a cat's bowl.
Okay.
Used only by humans. And now eat that toast. It's not pleasant. And Biden's got to listen to the left part of this. I mean, somewhere, I said this the other night, I was certain he'd swing right and pick Susan Rice. I was kind of shocked that he swung left toward Kamala Harris.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's still frustrating that it didn't swing, left of center to a Karen Bass type, or to think creatively about the pick in a way that really would have galvanized a lot of progressives and would have enabled him to capture some of the enthusiasm and the door knockers and volunteer, well, maybe not door knockers, but the volunteer efforts, the people making phone calls that set records for the Bernie campaign.
See, I blame the Karen Bass thing. See, I blame that on people like me, because when the more conservative Democrats decided to do their Oppo research and go after her because she went to Cuba,
right?
Because she said something nice about Castro when he died.
Yeah.
And just
Obama
blew that thing up. And, I was so busy with so many other things, and I'm in my own pandemic, runaround, that I didn't do anything about it. And I thought, oh my God, this is going to be the end of that. My brother-in-law actually taught economics at San Diego State, and she was one of his students. And of course he taught the, let's just call it our kind of economics. even though neither of us are named Carl. But but he had told me these great things about her, and I just thought, yeah, I should have been out there more to stop that, because they killed her. That was the end. That was the end of that possibility. But Kamala Harris. Okay, so we know the old stuff with her prosecutor, all that. But her record in the U.S. Senate, you have to admit, is as good as it gets for a Democrat, and which has been pretty decent. I mean, do you agree with that, or were you disappointed from the people on the short list that it was her?
Well, there are a couple of things. One is that her record is obviously pretty short since she just became a senator in 2017. And even given how short her record is there's a frustrating reality that she's already backtracked on some of her biggest commitments, right? She was the first person to sign on to Bernie Sanders' 2017 Medicare for All
First person,
bill.
and then she re-signed again in 2019.
And yet, here we are.
Yeah.
In the context of her own campaign, I truly believe she could be the Democratic nominee right now if she had shown a little backbone and not immediately capitulated on every stand she took in the course of the primary, from her rightful attack on Joe Biden over busing, which she started revising as soon as she got into the spin room. The moment she raised her hand saying that she wanted to eliminate private insurance, and then backtracked the second she got into the spin room. The fact that she backtracked on her commitment to Medicare for All overall and started talking about this 10-year plan, which was just basically a gift to the private insurance industry to dig in their heels and fight it tooth and nail, basically pledging not to see it through and within the context of her own administration, and then again and again and again. So at a certain point, and this goes back to what I was saying about swing voters and what I think ultimately a lot of voters who aren't that political are attracted to, you're looking for someone you can trust. And just because a poll shows you that you have a progressive voting record, often what those polls show you is how much you voted with your caucus as opposed to voted with Republicans. And so someone like Bernie Sanders, who will say, do a bipartisan deal with John McCain to get benefits for veterans, health benefits for veterans, that is perceived as voting against your party and shown as a less progressive record. But if you and a bunch of other corporate Democrats get together and vote to, deregulate the finance industry, then that's considered a progressive vote as long as everyone else in your party went along with it. So those polls don't show you much as outside of, frankly, how in step with your party you are, which can be a good thing or a bad thing, right? It's not qualitative. And so here we are. Is she the best? Is she the worst choice imaginable? No. Is she the best choice imaginable? Far from it. What I do think that it opens up, though, is the fact that she has made all these commitments in the past. Her previous positions are leverage and arguments you can take to Joe Biden if you're a journalist and ask him to reconcile his partnership with her with his draconian beliefs about marijuana legalization, Medicare for All, and some of these other big ticket items. Even, her debt cancellation plan was absurd, but at least it was some kind of debt cancellation plan. She was the one that had that Byzantine, if you start a small business in a low income community and it operates for 3 years, all of that nonsense.
I did a Shakespearean interpretive reading on the stage somewhere of it, but her heart's in the right place. So we need to encourage her to go back to, say, for instance.
Look, I'm not in a position to comment on her heart, but what I have seen is a record that shows a certain degree of opportunism, right? So that's not necessarily a bad thing if we can create circumstances that make it opportunistic for her to do the right thing, and put political pressure on the right way. I wrote about this years ago or I guess over a year ago now, when she first announced that.
It feels like years ago.
It feels like years ago. But my perspective as a lawyer on the kinds of people who come from kind of fairly elite educational backgrounds and choose to be prosecutors is that they do so for professional advancement, right? You don't earn very much money being a prosecutor, but you do it because you become very appealing to corporate firms because you get litigation experience that you can't get at a firm, because cases at firms very rarely go to trial. And or you do it to launch a political career. And, she started her political career out by running against an actual progressive prosecutor in San Francisco using a tough on crime message where she handed out flyers that had pictures of shirtless, tattooed Latino men throwing up gang signs saying enough is enough and bragging about her conviction record.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, this is who she is. And the fact that she has adopted a different stance now that, you know, the world has changed doesn't inspire me. You know, growth that seems organic is something that we should all laud, but there is nothing about her record that makes me confident that she has true, deep ideological commitments one way or the other.
Right. You're saying that you can't expect her to lead on these issues, but she will come along when she realizes that the wind has changed and the people are changing and want a different thing and want her to go in a different way.
Yeah. And this is I think the key point of the article as well. While Joe Biden is the only alternative to Donald Trump, the reality is that our vote should still be contingent on some kind of bare minimum, and that Democrats shouldn't forgo personal litmus tests. They shouldn't forgo their values simply because they want to beat Donald Trump. Their values are not inconsistent with beating Trump. They, in fact, help further that goal.
Explain that, because I think that's a really important point.
Okay. So if we were to say, so right now, the way it's framed is, if you don't vote for Biden, if you don't second up and vote for Biden, you've caused Donald Trump to win. That's blood on your hands. And the stakes genuinely are high. I want to be really clear about that. They are. Another way you could frame it is that because the things we're asking for will actually make Biden more electable, if we say our votes are contingent on Biden doing something like, let's say, supporting the legalization of marijuana, and Joe Biden chooses not to support marijuana legalization, something, again, he could do by executive order, then the onus is on Joe Biden if Donald Trump were to win, right? If Joe Biden decides, I don't want your vote, I don't need your vote, as he said to countless people who've approached him during the primary season about his stance on immigration and a number of other issues that Democrats in previous years have treated as real litmus tests, as real ideological lines in the sand. Suddenly, all that's out the window, even though it doesn't have to be for Biden to win. So if we frame it so that the onus is on Joe Biden for not doing the thing that overwhelming majorities of Americans want to do, then I think a really clear picture emerges about who our politicians are and who they're actually fighting for. Are they fighting for us, or are they fighting for the special interests that are filling their coffers?
Do you think, I mean, people listening to this right now, I don't want to create more confusion with people, but I am asking them to think and to dig deep into their own conscience and their own soul, what they believe in, what they want to fight for, the world, the American world that they want to see in 2 years or 4 years, what that's going to look like, how Biden and Harris are going to get us there, if they're going to get us there. You know, I know that people are saying, I can actually hear people before, while I'm recording the podcast, I can hear them listening to it. And they're like, Mike, Briahna, please. Okay, we know. Yes. I saw the flyers that she handed out in that prosecutor race. I live in San Francisco, but please, get on board. And what I say to them is, no, this is how I am on board. You want me on board this way. You want me to fight for these things now and after they're elected. Because, yes, of course, I'd rather not play defense during another 4 years of Donald J. Trump. I would rather play offense with Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. Playing offense for 4 years with them, pushing them, millions of us in our groups, on the streets, at the polls, online, whatever it takes. Millions of us saying, no. You're not to put another person in jail. You're to legalize marijuana. You are to a living wage. Yeah, $15 an hour. That's what we were talking about in 2016. That's not a living wage anymore. We need a living wage. We need all these things, and your corporate backers are just going to have to bite it because we're the people. And,
right.
And if I pull back from that, if you pull back from that, and if people listening to this can't understand that we don't want a hollow victory against Trump, we want one of substance to where we are really going to create true change in this country.
Yeah. And there's a pragmatic argument here too, which is that yes, every 4 years we're told this is the worst candidate ever. And it is true, which means that in all likelihood, 4 years from now, we're going to be looking down the barrel of a Tom Cotton candidacy. And Tom Cotton is supportive of all of the worst things that Donald Trump has ever done, but is also smarter and more ideological and more subtle about it. In a world where Tom Cotton were president and attempted the Muslim ban, it wouldn't have gotten overturned because he wouldn't have been so clumsy as Trump as to say, hey, I'm doing this because I'm discriminating against Muslims. And then it got, that's the rationale for why. Tom Cotton, people are upset, oh, Trump is tear gassing protesters in front of the White House. Tom Cotton's the one who wrote the op-ed saying that this is exactly what we should do, right?
Okay, so that Tom Cotton, we have a rule on the show here. Anytime you say Tom Cotton's name 5 times, it's now time for a musical interlude. Way down south in the land of Tom Cotton, old times there. Sorry about that. Actually, we just need to take a quick break here.
Sure.
And acknowledge our underwriters here who support the show. And then we'll be right back on the other side of this with Briahna Joy Gray. So today's underwriter is NetSuite. I'm sure everybody's heard of NetSuite. They're the world's number one cloud business system. And so NetSuite, which is run by Oracle, they became over time the number one cloud business system in the world. They've got like 20,000 plus companies that use NetSuite. And I want to encourage you to try them out. There's a free way to do this. And, this is the kind of thing where having something like NetSuite, you can run your whole thing from your phone, basically. And you can work wherever you want to work. This is one of these things that has helped us, especially during this pandemic. Doesn't matter where you are, what your situation is, doesn't matter how small you are or big you are, whatever. Having NetSuite available where you've got all your inventory, you've got all your e-commerce, your financial stuff, everything in one place. So here's what I'm asking you to do. You can get a free guide from them online. It's called 7 Actions That Businesses Need to Take Right Now. So you can schedule your own tour of NetSuite by Oracle by going to netsuite.com. Okay, NetSuite is spelled NETSUITE, NetSuite, capital NET, and then capital SUITE, just like it sounds, netsuite.com/rumble. You got to put the /rumble in there. Anybody that wants to support me, they're on the side of the angels. I hope you know that. And I would not allow any underwriter that I didn't think was doing something good for people and providing a service. And that's what they do. And I'm proud and honored to have them as an underwriter of this. So don't forget, get your free guide from them and schedule your free tour at netsuite.com/rumble. All right. Don't forget the /rumble, netsuite.com/rumble, and be sure and thank them for supporting Rumble with Michael Moore, so that my voice and your voice can be heard. Okay, now, sorry about singing the Tom Cotton theme. I mean, could there be a better name for this guy than Cotton?
There could not be. And let me tell you, it's going to galvanize a certain sector of America that is going to be a problem for us when he runs. So the question becomes, what are you going to say to us then? You're going to say to us then what you're saying to us now, which is you have to hold your nose and vote for whatever centrist Democrat that doesn't reflect, don't want to call them centrist, whatever corporate Democrat that doesn't reflect the general popular desires of all Americans, but particularly Democrats, because Tom Cotton is in fact the worst president ever. And we're going to get worse and worse Democratic candidates and worse Republican candidates. And what happens to entire generations of Americans, like my family in the Midwest in Cleveland, Ohio, who for the entire history of their existence, from slavery through the civil rights movement to freedom, has lived in a second, third tier of American society because we've been told, oh, just vote for the Democrats. Oh, just wait, your day will come. We have to, quell all of these exigent needs. At what point are basic human rights going to be extended to people who have been holding their nose and voting and have been the backbone of this party this entire time? I resist the notion that there has to be this trade-off between electability and doing the right thing. And they got us by
Yeah,
by the sensitive bits.
Yeah, no, we got to not let that happen, though. I didn't realize your family was from Cleveland.
Oh yeah, my mom's family.
Okay, so I'm sorry to have claimed the Midwestern card there earlier. I didn't mean to. And by the way, Cleveland's motto is Cleveland, we're not Detroit. So those of us in Detroit, Flint, we've been offended by this for a long time. That they somehow think they're better than us. But,
look, I think that at this point, everyone's got to be each other's buddy in the struggle.
That's right. Yes, thank you.
there's no enemies among thieves. What's the expression?
Something about you're the enemy of my enemy is my friend. No, no, that's the wrong one. But seriously though, go back to what you're saying here. That the importance of not letting that thing that forces us into some corner.
Yeah.
And then they're choking us with say it. Vote blue no matter who. Vote blue no matter who. No, it's not actually that easy. And, a lot of people can make the argument, that, well, if it had come down between Bloomberg and Trump, I could prove how Bloomberg would be more dangerous in the sense that simply because he's smarter.
Yes. And richer. He's the ninth wealthiest man in the world.
He's a real billionaire, multi-billionaire. That's right.
Literally, they're the ninth richest man in the world. And yet, if you were to have opened your mouth and said that during the primary, the only time, truthfully, as Bernie Sanders public representative, the only time that I ever felt like I had to not say truly what I felt personally in order to represent the campaign was when I was asked if I would personally vote for Bloomberg. Right? And having to dodge out of that question was uncomfortable because at a certain point that was my personal litmus test. There's no way in hell he's Republican. He's literally a Republican. Yeah. I'm not voting for him. He terrorized Black and brown people in New York City. I've been a New York resident since 2001.
Right.
I have been walking down the street with my brother when he's been pulled over by the cops. I'm not for existing, a 98 pound soaking wet with glasses teenagers. I'm not doing this. You know what I mean? And
that's right.
We enable
the
idea of a Bloomberg.
Yes,
we enable him to advance in politics when we don't call out how unconscionable, the fact that we will not go there. And he was able to get dozens of mayors, Black mayors in particular, to back up his campaign and legitimize his run, because he had the money to have the special mayor school and have everybody circulate through and donate to everybody's campaigns. And he'd been laying this foundation for over a decade.
Yeah.
And all of us, not saying anything about it, saying that we would vote for him under any circumstances, enabled him to get as far as he did. And frankly, come very close to throwing a wrench in Bernie Sanders' plans, Bernie Sanders' candidacy.
Right. If Bloomberg was mayor right now, take Trump out, put Bloomberg in. See, Trump, because Trump has some serious issues, and because he's both an idiot and a genius at the same time, which makes the genius part more dangerous. But he doesn't know how to pull off his October. Let me just tell everybody what the October surprise is. He wants a war with Iran, and in the Israeli United Arab Emirates agreement this past week, I'm certain is part of that, because they've been wanting this to go after Iran, as has Saudi Arabia. So Trump, I think, has been trying to put together his coalition with the help of Jared to take some kind of action against Iran before the election. But he's too stupid and clunky really to know how to pull that off. Whereas Michael Bloomberg, in the same shoes, in the same moment, would know exactly how to do it and would do it. And so you can't say to me, yeah, but he's a Democrat, so he's not as bad. Really? Well, it doesn't work like that anymore. And I think people, especially of your generation, Briahna, that you just can't tell young people this kind of bullshit. Yeah. Because they see it as complete bullshit and won't participate in it. And it's looking the other night there at the statistics in the polls, Biden is behind Trump in the over 65 vote. Okay. Trump wins that 35 to 64. He was only ahead of Trump. Biden was only ahead of Trump by, it was kind of like, 48, 46 or 47, 44. It was just 2 or 3 points is all it was that he was ahead of Trump in the 35 to 64. Only when you go to under 35 does Biden show in the polls a huge margin over Trump. You would think with so much support from younger adults that that what he would be speaking about right now would be those things that would make sure that they get out and vote. But I don't see that. And I don't hear it. And it's really what worries me, and it worries me about that CNN poll I quoted earlier, that or the fact that Michigan this week, Trump closed the gap. He's only 4 points behind in Michigan.
Yeah, it's terrifying. It's terrifying. And then you watch the convention, and the first night I was waiting, and I tweeted, did I miss any mention of policy? Did I miss it? Did anyone say a single thing about policy? And it went on until Bernie Sanders' remarks, which were the second to last remarks in 2 hours of convention, was the first time that anyone said anything other than an empty platitude. Anyone said, Bernie said a $15 minimum wage, free childcare, named actual policy positions that someone might be inclined to go to the polls to get, right? Every other person who spoke, and it was even worse the second night because there was no Bernie, just said things like, we got to be together. We got to make people have more access to healthcare. Joe Biden spoke at great length about his own personal tragedy and how important it is to have healthcare because he's experienced loss, but said absolutely nothing specific about how the rest of us who, yes, have also experienced a great deal of tragedy in our lives and personal loss, but have not been able to afford healthcare, we're going to be able to get through it, especially in the context of this pandemic. And there's something just really, I think, obscene about hoping people don't look or listen close enough to ask questions and see the extent to which they're being sold, yes, a milquetoast status quo, a complete lack of improvement over the dystopia that we live in, and frankly, that a lot of people lived in even under Obama. And until Democrats are willing to recognize that premiums have gone up 26% since Obamacare. Obamacare is a wonderful intervention that has made it so that 20 million more people have insurance than did before. This is not a round criticism. But the reality is that these programs are not perfect. And there are a lot of folks who went and voted for Trump. Yes, racism colors it, but not just because they hated Barack Obama because he's Black, but because they cannot afford their premiums. So you have American families paying $20,000 a year for healthcare, and they still have to pay a bill when they go to the doctor's office. These are real problems, and a lot of people would sit up and pay attention if the Democrats would give voice to them, but they won't. And it opens up a door for Donald Trump to get on TV at their convention and say, healthcare premiums are high and I'm going to fix it. And he said it in 2016 and people believed it, and maybe fewer people will believe it this time around because he has a demonstrated failure to follow through on those promises. But in the absence of an alternative coming from the guy who was in office when some of these problems emerged, it's a toss-up. It shouldn't be a toss-up.
Right. No, I know. This is what worries me, that trying to tone it down is going to cost us on election day or in the days or weeks leading up to it. That people have got to feel the way that people felt that morning that Obama was elected. People couldn't wait to get to the polls. After 8 years of George W. Bush, oh my God, people were like, and they weren't just going there because they weren't voting for Obama because he wasn't George W. Bush. I mean, there was a sense of feeling some sort of connection, no matter how simple it might have been. There was that. And now I wish I could get through to somebody and have them understand that this approach, the approach that Goldman Sachs wants you to take, the approach that the coalition of health insurance companies want you to take, the promise of love from Wall Street, this is what's actually could cost you the election. And I don't want anybody waking up on November 4th going, God, what was that podcast we were listening to back in August? Those two crazy people were talking about this could happen. I don't want to be that person again to again have to warn people that if you're trying to play it safe, if you're trying to talk sort of Republican-ish, if you bring a war criminal like Colin Powell out onto the stage, wow. You know, I thought about if anybody in Iraq is watching this right now, just any average family has got a TV set and is watching Colin Powell, who lied to the world about what the Iraqis were up to and cost them God knows how many hundreds of thousands of lives. I mean, Briahna, I don't know. This is why I wanted to talk to you. I wanted you to come on the episode here today, and I didn't tell you why in advance. I wanted to just kind of, well, I was hoping I'd feel better, frankly, by the time we were going to record. And I wouldn't have to begin by saying I was depressed. But I am depressed. And I'm afraid now, after we're in the third, as we're recording this, the third night of the convention, and it's beginning to look like the parts of the movie Starship Troopers, where they have all that kind of Orwellian video and that footage where you too can sign up. You know, Joe Biden is a decent man, you know, and yes, I've met him a few times. He is decent. Yes. But God damn it. We have so many things we need to be fighting for and fixing in this country. We need to come out of this pandemic a better people, and decency isn't going to get it. Let's just all assume he's decent. Can we please spend the last night of the convention? Can we at least talk about how we're getting there and why we're fighting for these things? What are the things we're actually fighting for? Why is this not being discussed? Why is it just, we're going to see Obama and he's going to say some cool things because he's a cool dude. But it's like, oh man, please somebody, Briahna. It's not like I've called my one lifeline here, but I really listen. I'm not alone. There are literally hundreds of thousands of people listening to this podcast right now, and they want. I'm sorry to put this on you. I'm incapable of it right now. So you need to wire this thing together so that we remain true to these things that we desperately believe in, but also how we then help move this ball down the field and get rid of Trump and get Biden and Harris in there. And then we have to be right there pushing, or we won't get anything done. I'm just going to, we're getting near the end here, and I'm going to turn this over to you to lead us. I need you to lead us. I'm sorry, I know you've had, but you've done so well. I've listened to your podcast. I've read your writings. You are really, in my humble opinion, one of our great thinkers.
Oh gosh.
And I mean that. And you're a gift. You're a gift to the people of this country, and your voice needs to be heard and amplified. And now I have put you on the spot, but we need to leave a few 100,000 people here at the end of this with not some kind of false hope, not a unicorn, not pie in the sky, but see, you and I think we believe that there can be victory, but it's how you define that victory and how we get there and what we do with it after we have it. And now the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, but I do want to say that I don't want to pretend to be in a leadership position or kind of usurp unearned authority. I'm myself pretty new to all of these movements and to politics, but what I think that I do have is in some ways an outsider, somewhat normie perspective. I am someone who is an analytical thinker, who went to law school because she liked to argue and parse why we believe what we believe and why we do what we do. And it seems to me what we need is a sort of intervention. When I talk about voting and leverage and whether or not we should ensure that our votes are not freely given, but conditioned on some very basic principles, that we should decide who we are as a party and what it means to be a Democrat and what you're willing to vote for and what you're willing to not vote for, what you're willing to pull Democrats back from the brink of, even if there is some risk of short-term failure. These are difficult, heady questions, and I don't know the answer to them. I don't know what people's risk tolerances are, and I'm not in a position to tell people what to do. But The same way an intervention is a kind of dramatic act of almost violence that you do to someone you love to try to get them on the straight and narrow and really see that they're heading in the wrong direction. It feels to me like being honest about our critiques of Joe Biden and even saying that our vote should be contingent on him doing the bare minimum, in the context of the largest protest movement in American history, that at very least he should commit to legalizing marijuana, that he should take seriously the requests from the Black Lives Matter movement, which include canceling all student debt, which include a $30 minimum wage, which include, Medicare for all, that he should have to make some concessions to the majority of the party and the majority of the country that he plans to represent. I think that is ultimately going to inure to the benefit of his campaign and contribute to his ability to beat Donald Trump. And by letting him do what he's doing now, he is squandering a lead. He's squandering disappointment with Trump that has led many people to defect already. And I don't think that we're doing him any favors, and we're certainly not doing ourselves and our communities any long-term favors by saying that this is the best we can do and this is the best we can expect. I don't think we should apply a kind of soft bigotry of low expectations to Joe Biden. I think he can be a better candidate than he is. And I think personally, it's worth considering our role in helping him to be that.
He can be better, right? He has to be better.
He has to be better.
And our role, as you said, our role in that is what? I mean, obviously you and I are speaking publicly about it right now. Maybe one of his grandkids is listening to this. But for the other people that are listening, what can we the people, this movement, what can we do to not wait till January 20th, but to insist right now, to have him to appeal to his, whatever that is on his better side, to go further than that?
I've never personally gotten one of those calls that, were polling calls. But I think the reality is, regardless of what you plan to do at the voting booth, I think it's incumbent on us to make our discontent known now. If Biden keeps seeing polls that say everyone's going to vote for him, that overwhelming majorities of Democrats and overwhelming majorities of Bernie supporters and overwhelming majorities of the supporters of all the other candidates are going to vote for him regardless of what he does, that the number one issue is beating Trump, that they don't care about these other material concerns, even in the midst of this crisis, then he really doesn't have any incentive. And I think the protest movement in the streets, I understand that obviously COVID is out there and a lot of people can't protest and are at risk. And I respect that enormously. But, people in the streets puts pressure, especially if their message is really specific and tied to policy asks that are doable, that can't be dismissed as pie in the sky or like a pony. So I think we have to keep that pressure up. And there are elected representatives like Rashida Tlaib, who has said, I don't sign on to the Democratic Party platform because it is disrespectful to what our communities need right now, to thumb your nose at taking care of healthcare, to thumb your nose at rent relief, to thumb your nose at, as people are being literally cast out into the streets with their belongings, with no shelter from a disease that could kill them.
Right.
I think we got to talk in those terms. We can't shy away from it.
And he can fix that right now. Forget about the platform, the convention, whatever, next week, whatever. He can say, you know what? Yeah, we forgot about rent relief. We forgot about these things. We have to do it. I'm going to do it. There's nothing that prevents him from saying anything. Nothing.
Yeah.
And
even the
$2,000.
I mean, I remember at one point, one of the people who spoke at the convention was talking about $2,000 monthly payments. And I thought to myself, wait a minute, has Joe Biden committed to that? Because he was asked by Jeff Stein of the Washington Post a month or so ago, and the campaign issued a non-committal written response. So there's this real misrepresentation that's happening right now where everyone is kind of assuming that Joe Biden supports things that Kamala Harris and some of the more progressive members of Congress, Bernie Sanders, have been supporting during this whole COVID process when he actually hasn't made those commitments. So journalists who are listening, people who are able to call their representatives, I think we really have to get him to commit on paper now to things and not just assume that we can push him some kind of way once he's in office. Once he's in office, there is no leverage. There's none.
Right. Now. Has to be now.
And
again, for the people that are wondering why we're doing this episode, it's because we have no doubt about ourselves, the people we know. Everybody's going to, if my goal is to remove Trump, you can't just vote. You got to bring 5-10 people with you. And if the electorate is depressed because they are more worried about how they're going to pay the rent this month and they hear nothing from the candidate about that, they're not going to not vote for him. They're going to vote for him. But they're not going to be as they've got to deal with their lives, and they're not going to go and get 10 other people to go vote on election day. Right. And if that doesn't happen, I'll repeat the CNN poll again from Monday. Battleground states, registered voters, the poll was 49% for Biden, 48% for Trump. That's the reality. And I'll tell you that I know that from Michigan, and I know that. Do not take any of this for granted. But it's not just about, hey, let's just go get people to vote. They're not just going to knock on somebody's door and get them to vote. They've got to have a reason to get out there.
Right.
And I want to remind people of this statistic that I gave you when I started this podcast. In the 2016 election in Michigan, it was cold on election day. People stood in line 3, 4, 5 hours in the cities of Detroit, of Flint, of Pontiac, of Benton Harbor, Grand Rapids, Saginaw, Lansing. 89,000 Michigan voters stood in line for all that time just so that they could go in, and they voted for everybody down ballot on the ballot, Congress, state Senate, drain commissioner, and they left the top box blank for president. And most of these were Democratic ballots. They wanted to go and sacrifice half their day just so they could send a message to the Democratic Party. We are not going to vote for a candidate that's not for us. And you can have all your pundits talking all you want and all they want about how Bill Clinton was the first black president, how black people love the Clintons, just like we've had to listen to this about Joe Biden. You can say that all you want. But that election in 2016 came down to black Americans who have suffered in Flint, who have suffered in Milwaukee, who have suffered in Philadelphia, and were unable to rise above that. And if they went to vote, to send a message by leaving that box blank. But I'll tell you, I know in Flint alone, there were 8,000 African Americans who voted twice in the Obama elections and did not go out in the election of 2016. And that's not because they didn't care. Right. But you can only beat people down so far.
At the stat that I love from an article by Malika Jabali in Current Affairs a couple years ago was that there were 88,000 black voters in Wisconsin who voted in 2012 and didn't vote in 2016. And when polled and asked why, voter suppression was less than 4% of the response. The bulk of the answers were about being disaffected. My vote doesn't matter. It's not going to change anything. Those kinds of answers, right?
This could happen again.
Yeah.
Maybe not on the same scale as Hillary, but it could definitely happen again. And now is the time for Joe Biden to take this by the reins and not let that happen, and say what he's going to do and promise to act on it. No platitudes, no hollowness, the real deal. People hear that, they're going to come out and vote. But if you think that you're trying to placate Republicans and you're trying to convince Trump voters to come out and vote for you, that is the plan, that's what it looked like during the convention. That's the plan. That's the wrong plan. First of all, the Republicans who hate Trump, they're either going to stay home, or if they do, yes, of course, they're going to come out and vote for Biden. You've already got their votes, just like you've got our votes. So if that's the case, why don't you just do the right thing?
Right.
Now, why not guarantee your victory by doing the right thing and telling people, the disaffected and the disillusioned, the beaten down, that not just that you're there for them, but this is specifically what you're going to do for them. Oh man, I can hear the confetti and the balloons dropping on the night of November 3rd right now. If they would just listen to this.
Yeah.
Oh, Briahna.
But remember, I want to be clear about it. It's not about whether Biden is a good guy and he pays attention and Barack Obama is a good guy and everyone's a good guy. That's irrelevant. What matters is that Joe Biden's senior advisor is a healthcare lobbyist. What matters is that there's so much more corporate money pouring into this campaign. So when we ask about tangible things we can do, perhaps more than any policy commitment would be to demand that Joe Biden extricate himself from all of this corporate influence and make promises and commitments about not filling his cabinet with people who have just spun out of the revolving door.
Did you hear that, Joe? I second what Briahna just said. That would do more to guarantee people wanting to vote for you.
Yeah, he's not naive, right? People don't understand what they're paid not to understand.
Right. How are we leaving this?
Look, I'm still in an optimistic place, and you might call me naive or delusional, but to me, the game isn't over yet because we're 2.5 months before the election, and the general election has just started. And our opportunity as voters to shape this race is still very much in play. Now, the moment after the election, if Joe Biden wins and the kind of neoliberal corporate wing of the Democratic Party is validated in their belief that the way to stay in power is to do the bare minimum for the people they represent, like that is going to be a dark day for me. I think obviously it'd be lovely to have Donald Trump out of office, but at the end of the day, our goals are so much bigger than that. So, this is the moment where we still have power. And I think that's what the vote blue no matter who people really don't want us to realize. And I know it's risky. And again, I'm not telling anybody what to do. And I'm certainly not telling anybody in Michigan what to do. But, as a New Yorker, I think a lot about the value of my vote and the value of casting my vote to run up vote totals and the power of my own leverage. And it seems to me the most leverage you can have is to say, Joe Biden, my vote is gettable. I want you to earn my vote. I want to cast a vote for you. I don't want you to put yourself in a position to be worse off against Trump. I don't want to hurt you. Here's how I think I'm helping you by asking you to move to a position that's more aligned with the majority of voters so that you can both help us survive this crisis and also be better positioned to beat Donald Trump and draw stronger contrast as this general election gets kicked off.
Well, I think that ask is a reasonable request of Joe Biden, and it's doable, and it not only won't cost him anything in terms of it will only gain him the victory, and of his victory, but and also the crash and burn of Donald J. Trump.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Briahna, for this time. Do I feel a little bit better? Well, I do actually, because I've had a number of thoughts during this discussion of what I could be doing and what I maybe will be doing in the coming week. So we'll just stay tuned for that after I've had a night to sleep on this. But thank you very much.
Of course. And thank you for blessing me with the title of the first return guest.
The first return guest on Rumble, a Rumble repeat. So now you've set the record, and others will have to try to at least match it. But no, and to anybody who's been on the show, by the way, who just heard me say that, I've loved all of you. You've all been great, and I do want you all to come back on. But I needed help out of the funk that this convention has kind of put me in. Didn't start out that way. I love that first hour on the first night. It was all the real normal people.
Yeah.
It was very sweet and good. And then by the second night, we were into Starship Troopers. So, anyways, thank you everybody who has been listening to this. Don't forget, you can write to me at mike@michaelmoore.com. You can leave me a voice message on my voicemail, which is right here on this podcast site. You just click on the link and it will dial me up, and you got a minute to leave. I can't call everybody back, but please leave me a voice message. I'd love that. I listen to every one of them. And Basil, we're gonna hit number 15 million of our listeners, number of listeners downloads, probably sometime around this weekend or right after it. So we've got to have what's our prize? We'll have another virtual drawing of our 15 millionth listener. What do we have in the bag for them? For 5 million and 10 million got to be a guest on the show. It was really cool talking to them. So maybe we'll do that again. But anyways, I want to thank, by the way, Basil Hamden, our executive producer, our editor and sound engineer, Nick Quaz, to everybody else who's been supportive of this podcast. Please share it with your family and your friends. And once again, thank you to Briahna Joy Gray for being part of this episode here during Convention Week. Briahna, thank you. Please keep up the good work.
Oh, thank you. Right back at you times 1,000.
All right. Thank you. Thanks, everybody. This has been Rumble with Michael Moore.